Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and I'm excited to have Matthew Kent in the factory with us today. Welcome, Matthew.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it also. You are my first LitRPG guest, and it's a vibrant subgenre, and we could dive into it and talk all about it, but it stands for literary role-playing game. You use game mechanics, you can go into it, and in a sense, emulate the experience of playing a role-playing game from the vantage point of storytelling through that lens, using some of that formatting, setting up attributes, creating worlds. And I find that very compelling and interesting. And it's way more vibrant a genre than I had even thought it was. So hats off to you for rocking it.
Well,
And
thank
tell
you.
us how you got into it and your approach to it.
Well, I started reading LitRPG probably about 2014, and my first novel came out in 2017. And most people don't realize, but the idea of the genre actually dates back to the 1980s. There was a series of novels where the person was writing, and it would be considered either portal fiction or isekai, where a group of people were taken into a world where it was a fantasy world and they could level up, but it didn't show the mechanics like LitRPG did. It's been very big in Russia. D. Russ is one of the big authors over there. Um, Vasily Mahenko and a couple of others, some very good work. But it really started kicking off here about 2012, 2014. One of the first books I read was called NPCs. And the story is actually hilarious when you look at it. These NPCs are in the tavern one night when a group of players come through, and the players are all typical. They don't know anything. They've eaten poison mushrooms. They're in the tavern and they die. The NPCs ransack their pockets and find out that these players have a summons from the king, who is known to get very upset when people don't show up. And they're afraid that he's going to come in and kill everybody else in the town. So they decide that they're going to impersonate the players. And hijinks ensue. Nobody winds up being what they think that they're going to be. They have a triple gnome who becomes a paladin. They have the orc bartender becomes a wizard. They have the mayor's daughter who becomes a barbarian, and the town guard who becomes a thief. And it is just absolutely hilarious. And that's kind of where I got started. And then I started listening to the books and reading the books. And finally, my first book I wrote, The Apprentice of Arabella. And it went pretty well. It was way too short. It was about 55,000 words. But I was happy with telling the story. And it became a series. The second book is The Prisoner of Arabella. And finally, The War for Arabella, which I just recently completed. I'd almost gotten it done, and then my hard drive died with my only copy of it on there. And you know how it is when your hard drive dies and you have a project.
Yeah, Matthew, it's 2026, buddy. You got to load that shit up to the cloud.
Well, I'm doing that now. I actually now have about 3 different computers that I work on. I keep working copies everywhere. I've got copies on saves and thumb drives, and boy, whoever knew that thumb drives were going to get so cheap.
Yeah, you can get a terabyte for $20. Less than that, right?
Oh, it's crazy. We've got a place down here. You can go and buy 320 gigabyte drives for about $15. And like you've probably seen the computers from their inception. I remember our first one, a TRS-80 Model 3, and good God, a hard drive for that was $10,000 back in the day.
I remember paying, I think, $600 for an Apple IIe hard drive extender, and I think it was a whopping 20 megabytes.
Yeah,
I paid $600 for 20 megabytes, and I thought I was the man.
it's just crazy. And then you think about it. I mean, my kids are young. I've got twin 7-year-olds and a 9-year-old. They don't understand. My cell phone has more computing power than the computers that sent the Apollo programs up.
Oh, by exponential magnitudes.
Yeah. But my latest book, of course, is Aether Earth 1953. And it's a retroactive system apocalypse, which the system apocalypse is where a system comes to the Earth and pretty much destroys all the technology. But it happens in 1953, where we don't have the integrated circuits. And so we didn't have fine and delicate technology that could be damaged by power surges or monosurges or anything like that. Instead, you've got pretty simple things. You've got fuel, you've got air, and you've got a machine that runs off of it. And that's pretty much it. Um, so far, it's been really fun to write. People seem to be really enjoying book one. Book two came out, and we've been having a little controversy with Amazon and the way that they're doing the ratings now because they're trying to stop a lot of people that are uploading AI books. These are books that are just written by AI, and somebody throws in a prompt. They've got a book at the end of after about 10 minutes and throw it up there and they move on to the next one. So they're trying to stop that by making it harder to get ratings and reviews up for about the first 2 weeks. But it's impacting the self-published authors and some of the smaller independent author publishing houses like Royal Guard Publishing, who I published through for the Aether Earth series. So we've got a little bit of things we're working through with that, but both of the books are doing fairly well. I am pretty much a no-name author, even though I've been publishing for years under my own publishing house. I just don't have quite the level of name recognition that, say, Matt Denneman does, which he's a fantastic guy. I've talked to him a couple times online. Dungeon Crawler Carl, of course, is bringing in a lot more people into the realm of LitRPG. And it's absolutely hilarious. My brother, I've told him about it for years. And he's like, oh, I don't know if it's anything I really want to listen to. And then he listened to the first book for Dungeon Crawler Carl, and now he's hooked. So that's been a really good thing for us. It's bringing in new writers, new readers, new listeners, and it's kind of going more mainstream now. Um, there's a few books that I would say are kind of seminal works. One of my absolute favorites is called The Trap Mind Project by Michael Chatfield. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not. That's why I love having you on. You're turning me on to this genre. I knew Dinneman and some of the bigger guys, but I'm not familiar with this one.
Okay, so Michael Chatfield is one of the really big writers in lit RPG. But this is probably his first series. And the idea is that aliens have destroyed the earth. But they get the idea that they're going to use humanity to take care of their problems, which they've got monsters and other people that are pressing in on their areas. So they recreate humanity and they make humans think that the game is or that the game is just a game. Instead, the game is actually the reality. Reality is the game. So they make it to where it's boring. Real life is boring, and when you feel pain in the real world, it's much worse than if you're in the game. So they gear people to become gamers. Well, one of the gamers actually winds up being an important person, and he runs a corporation that the world depends on. And so he starts going into the game, and the real world loses him to the game. And so he becomes a bleeder, which is somebody that um, they can't be replaced and they can't really be controlled. And from there, he learns the real secret that Earth is destroyed. He's living it, the game is actually real, and that all these people that he thinks are NPCs are real people. And they've made orcs and dwarves and humans and everything in the fantasy setting because humanity is really good at one thing, and that is killing things. And just overall, they can respawn and come back, where the original creators of this technology, they can't, or can't very often, because eventually they go insane. So it's a really good series. It's I believe 12 books. Um, Dave Wilmarth is another very good author. He's got some really good series. Um, Blaze Corbin. Now, Blaze Corbin's Luckstat strategy is another really good one to get into. He also does Delvers LLC, and that one is just a really fun series.
Well, thanks for turning me on to these. I got to check them out. Let's talk a little bit about LitRPG as a style. Now, one thing that you're bringing up is how you need to introduce into these stories the idea that the protagonist and the characters are in a game-like environment, like some
Okay.
kind of simulation, some kind of situation, because the entire setup is this interface. And the writing highlights some of the gamified elements. So you share attributes of the characters, you share goals like you would be
Right.
playing a video game on screen. So one aspect is this, how is this world within a gamified environment, right?
Well, one of the key aspects of LitRPG is that the numbers that you see actually have to have some impact with the story. So when you see somebody leveling up and they get stronger, you have to show how they're getting stronger. Some settings they have it to where people get super strong, and then others it's more okay. You can go from normal human to Captain America level of strength or Spider Man level of strength. And so it has to be something that the attributes that you're dealing with impact the story. It's just like with progression fantasy, which is where somebody's training and progressing and growing stronger in that way. Um, it's really an umbrella. Think of it as an umbrella of game lit. Then you have lit RPG. From there, you have Portal Fantasy. You have Isekai, which is the idea of somebody is struck and sent to another universe. The often thing is they call it truck kun in Japan or Japanese, and it is a moving truck that hits somebody and keeps driving on, and they're knocked into another universe. I'm actually developing a story based on that called Cross World Delivery, and it's told from the view of the driver. So he's down on his luck. His brother's disappeared. The mob shows up at his doorstep, and they want their money. So what's he going to do? One day he's walking, he's worried about it. He sees a flyer, he pulls it down. They're looking for a driver, no questions asked. Well, they're paying and you know he's got to do it. He needs to get the mom paid off before they start to visit his mom. And next thing you know, there's an accident. And he looks and he can't find anything on the truck. He can't find anything around, but he knows that he hit somebody and he doesn't know what's going on. So it kind of goes on from there. There's other stories like Tao Wong's. He has a couple different series. He has the literary apocalypse, and it's where the world ends. His is Life in the North. Very good series. It is, I think, 12 novels actually, or maybe it's not. I lose track sometimes. There are just so many books to read and to get through. Troy Osgood is another very good writer, very prolific. I can't believe it. He's been writing for 7 years. I think he has 52 books out. He averages about a book a month. And some people are going to be going, oh, he's using AI. No, he's that good. He's that dedicated. He loves the stories. And he's able to sit down and focus to that extent that he's literally, for the past 7 years, been putting out about 140 to 170 words a month, 170,000 words a month. So when you get somebody that's really engaged, and that's the other aspect. Most of the writers, they love the gaming, they love the stories. This is one of the few genres that you're going to have people come in that want to write, and you can tell that they don't really enjoy it because their stories are lackluster and kind of just plain Jane. Um, it's just absolutely amazing. And I think I saw that we were getting on average about 10 new books a week in the genre. So it's really hard to keep up with now.
That's exciting and interesting. And just for the sake of those who haven't had exposure to it, let alone swimming in it like you have been for years and all the great authors that you mentioned, let's talk a little bit about how lit RPG is different from what we would consider conventional prose.
Okay, well, the way that it would be different is you do get the structure of a system, you get the character sheets. So when you're looking at the character sheets, you can see what the person can do. Okay, so say that he's a scout. So he can hide. He's good at tracking. He has higher dexterity, higher agility. It depends on what exactly the stats that the writer comes up with. Um, in Aether Earth, one of the statistics that we have is grit, which is how much a person can go through kind of a self worth thing, cowboy thing, which kind of fits because it starts off in Texas, of course. Um, if there's a system out there, it's been used. One of the most common ones, of course, is Dungeons and Dragons, because it's something that everybody that's ever gamed is kind of familiar with, or played a video game is familiar with. Strength, dex, con, intelligence, charisma, and wisdom. So that's kind of the default setting. Some people have chosen just three things, and it's a much broader. And then, of course, there's the use of mana, and some people even go into the use of stamina. So if you have higher constitution, you have higher stamina, so you have more staying power and more ability to walk or run um, and fight. Or if you have more mana, of course, you're able to cast more spells or higher level spells. So everything is kind of relative that way. But then, of course, the other aspect is the system. How does the system interact with the people? Is it a nice system? Is it a bad system? If you've listened to Dungeon Crawler Carl, the computer is the system pretty much. And really likes Carl's feet. Um, so you get the weird aspects too. Is it going to be snarky? Is it going to be, helpful? Or is it going to carry a grudge? Because some of them really do seem to carry a grudge towards characters. And
By system, you're really talking about, in a sense, another narrative voice. So I want to dial back
exactly.
a little bit because there's a lot of people who are unfamiliar with, you say lit RPG, they don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And I want to frame it within the context of even the syntax being different. Now, when you read a standard prose science fiction fantasy book, you've got paragraphs of varied length, right? And it
Yeah.
flows. It's a narrative. When you're reading lit RPG, what Matthew is pointing out, just to the uninitiated, you're reading like you'd read a standard science fiction and fantasy book, but then you're literally given stats of the characters that are provided by the system. I want to define these
Right.
terms. So you have a little narrative, like the character enters a bar or a scene, and then literally the system will interrupt the flow of the narrative, given how it's set up, and it'll list out the attributes of the character. So grit, stamina, all these variables that Matthew is highlighting, and then give them a numerical value like Dungeons and Dragons. And
Yeah.
as the story progresses, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm kind of a newbie, these stats will change and evolve based on the character's trajectory through that story. And part of the appeal here, I'm thinking, is that you go from a baseline where you know all the stats, and then because of their challenges and their interactions, the stats start to grow. So you feel a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment on the part of the protagonist for getting from A to B to C to D in a lit RPG story. Is that right?
Exactly. It's very much that way. Based on whatever system the person is using, as you level, you can gain stats, or as you're doing different things, you can gain stats. It would be like, for instance, one of the books I wrote, it is The Sorceress of San Antonio, and the main character is a young girl. She's trying to figure out this whole system thing. And one of the things she finds out is that if she does exercises, she can grow her stats. But it's not, oh, I did 15 push ups and now I'm 1 point stronger. It's, I did 15 push ups and I'm 0.01% stronger. So you're seeing growth. It's slow, but it's like the real world because you're not going to grow super strong, with just a few presses of the dumbbells or barbells. So it's different aspects like that where you're seeing that growth, but it comes into play and it has meaning to the story. And it gives the character a reason for doing some of the things that they're doing, like practicing and learning. And in a way, it's showing them growing stronger. Another aspect of it is sometimes they will have it to where you can learn spells or buy spells from somewhere, or as you level, you can learn spells and different abilities. And that's going to vary from system to system and book to book. Um, there's some very unique systems out there. Uh, but right now, the top books that I keep seeing referenced are, let's see, of course, Dungeon Crawler Carl. Then we have He Fights with Monsters. And those are some of the top ones. Another one that I absolutely love, but doesn't get very much love in the book world, is The Stork Tower. It's written by a gentleman out of Australia. And this phenomenon is taking over really the world because we're getting authors from all over the place. He Who Fights with Monsters, the author's name is Shirtaloon, and he's from Australia. And you see that reflected in the main character. how they speak, their tone of voice. But the big thing for LitRPG is the audiobooks. That's one of the big denominators right there of uh, people's enjoyment is listening to the audiobooks, because then the narrator actually can become a big part of the story. Jeff Hayes is absolutely phenomenal with Dungeon Crawler Carl and a lot of the other books that he's written.
So for the audiobook, I'm assuming that you're going to have multiple voices usually. So the system has a voice, right?
So
And
yeah,
it
the
cuts
system has a
in.
voice.
The system has a voice. And once again, for the uninitiated, the system is the background setup who's providing this additional narrative information, the stats.
It's providing the traditional narrative information, but it's also a framework.
There could be other things that interrupt the normal, what I'm considering the normal flow of a narrative with this extra stuff. That's another voice. That's the system, right? And then the regular narrative goes to maybe another voice to differentiate that, because I'm trying to highlight the big difference in lit RPG. You take it for granted. You're swimming in it. You're living in it.
That's true.
But this
And
is weird shit for most science fiction and fantasy readers. So I find it very interesting and compelling for these reasons, and a big reason is because of these significant differences, not only in narrative flow but in syntax. When you're reading a lit RPG book, the narrative is literally interrupted with stats, with alerts, with all this extra system information. And I find that very interesting.
yeah, it is. And depending on how the person interacts with it, sometimes it can be used to their betterment, and sometimes it'll wind up being to their detriment. In Life in the North, the main character is riding down the road on a motorcycle, and his uh, systems helper says, "Oh, you would know. There's people up ahead. You'd know them as orcs." And he's like, "Oh, okay, orcs. I know orcs." And they wind up shooting him in the shoulder, and he has an accident on his motorcycle. And he's like, "Ali, you told me they were orcs." I said, "No, I told you they were like orcs." He's like, "Orcs aren't supposed to have guns." It's like, well, that's your fault. So it's you know, it comes down to the character's perception of what's actually going on and how they're interacting and what the system actually is. And generally, the viewer might have or the reader might have a better idea of what the system actually is because they're reading the system messages. But generally, the characters in the story don't know exactly what the system is, how it works, how it impacts them, or if there's secret stuff going on behind the scenes, which oftentimes there are.
That's very, very interesting. So you have a bit of a second person narration alongside the protagonist, and then the reader can put two and two together. The reader's got more information than the characters do, and that could add to some of the tension and build up some of the drama.
Yeah. And it's just absolutely amazing how it can blend together. And this is one of those genres that it didn't really exist and wasn't really recognized by Amazon or anything until about 2 or 3 years ago. Um, Now it's a little bit more recognized. It's actually becoming much more popular. I've actually used it in some short stories that I have authored myself. I've sent some to like Raconteur Press, if you're familiar with them. Absolutely fantastic guys.
I'm going to have Sam Robb on the show next week.
Oh, he's a great guy. But I've got a couple pieces in with them with Moogies of Mars and Moogie Noir. So those have been pretty good.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm highlighting some of the differences, Matthew, because this is new. Not that many people are familiar with it. And I think the differences are striking and very, very interesting. And it also raises a few questions. One question is, do you need all that extra stuff, and does it sometimes get in the way of just telling the story? That's one question. And then the other question related to that is, how does all of this extra system information add to the story in ways that other science fiction and fantasy
That's
doesn't
actually a
do?
very good question. Now, for myself, I use it to help try and tell the narrative, showing how the character is changing, why the character is changing. For instance, in Aether Earth, John, the main character, you only see his stats throughout most of the book. But at the beginning, he's comparing his stats with his friend Deke. And they're joking about it because this is the first day it's happened within the first few minutes. They're not really taking it as serious as they might. The main character is a veteran. He served in Korea. You know, the world's just ended, and he suddenly got these stats that are saying that he's not very charismatic. And, he's like, yeah, that's kind of something I know. you know, what do you want me to do about it? Um, but it's key. It can be key to telling the story, but the problem comes in is keeping track. And most of us, we wind up using Word and that kind of thing to keep track of everything. Um, it's a lot of tables. You have to be careful with your math. You can easily make mistakes. I've had people come back on my book and say, hey, look, there's a mistake in your math on page 68, and it shows that he should have actually been higher than what he was in such and such a stat. I mean, readers track this. I mean, you thought Star Trek was bad. There are readers that absolutely love the work, and they will go through and they will read it with a fine tooth comb, and they will pick apart your system. They will pick apart your ideas. And that's where a lot of the authors, actually, that's one of the reasons that a lot of the authors go to Royal Road. Are you familiar with Royal Road?
Not really. Not at all, actually.
Okay. Royal Road is a site that a lot of lit RPG authors go to and publish their work for free. And what winds up happening is people start reading through their work, and they will leave messages, they will leave ideas, they will comment. And generally, it is kind of a way to get beta readers for your work, a large, massive beta readers. And everybody's like going, oh, well, if you post it there, you can't really sell it because it's already out and about. That's the funny thing. People who read on Royal Road aren't going to be buying your books. They're not your customers so much as they are a helper to the system. So Dungeon Crawler Carl got started there. He Who Fights with Monsters got started there. The Traveling Inn got started there, and that's just insane. There's like 34 million words for the Traveling Inn already. Um, some of the best new authors get started on there, and they continue to publish their work. Then once they get ready to publish it through Amazon, they pull it all down because, of course, with Amazon, you can't have it in Kindle KU if it's published anywhere else. Um, Absolutely phenomenal. And a lot of the writers wind up getting book deals through there because the publishing houses that do lit RPG pay attention to the people that are on Rising Stars, the people whose read throughs are absolutely phenomenal, that the books are doing great. And this is something that you don't see in any other type of publishing. I don't even think you see this in the romance area, which would be the one that would be most akin to literary RPG.
It's like crowdsourcing content with
Yeah,
beta readers and sharing and commentary. It's like a cauldron of creativity for
it really
writers, and then
is.
free content for readers, and it's pretty interesting.
It is. The other aspect too of Royal Road, like I said, is that a lot of people go on there. It kind of refines the ideas. You can refine your blurb, um, work on your cover if you're going to self publish. I've done that before. Um, but it's geared more towards, like I said, the lit RPG, which again, it's a bubble. It contains so many different things. Wuxia, which is like a more Chinese cultivation base idea. If you have any idea of that would be like Will White's Cradle series. Again, that's another fantastic series to listen to. But it's just there's so many aspects of it. The other aspect too is that the genre is really based not like a lot of others where you get the readers coming to you because you're advertising. It's because you're in social media and you're there and you're talking to the readers and you're sharing what you're doing, and your readers get to know your work through you. Um, Reddit, Facebook, Book Talk, TikTok, all those different things are the real key aspects for the marketing for Lit RPG. And again, I keep saying it's also the marketing for the romance books. But again, the two groups kind of share a lot of the same aspects as far as who their readership is. Lit RPG readers tend to be very well read in their genre. Um, Kindle KU is one of the biggest things that has helped the industry and the readers, and the writers actually, because there's some readers that will read 10, 15 books a month. And these are not small books. Most RPG books start at 100,000 words on up to, I think a few of them are 350 ish, with the one that has the most, of course, being The Wandering Inn at 1,400 words, I believe, for the first book. So, or 1,400 pages, sorry, pages. Um, it's absolutely crazy. Then, of course, the word count for the listen through. Most lit RPG books on the audiobooks are going to run at least 12 hours. That's the kind of the sweet spot. 120,000 words, about 12 hours worth of listening time for a credit off of audiobooks. So, absolutely amazing.
And it's fascinating because it's such counterpoint to how most other genres function, including science fiction and fantasy. So this whole lit RPG to me is fascinating on all these different levels. You got this kind of cauldron of creativity where writers share their stuff. You've got an enormous community of people who are into it. You've got books that are much, much longer and more detailed than your average science fiction, fantasy, and even romance. And it sounds like there's this enormous lit RPG community where people are reading 10, 15 books a month and they're totally into it. So you got a captive audience, you've got an entrenched style, you've got your masters doing their work, and then you've got a lot of other writers too who are joining the ranks and participating. So I think a lot of folks don't even know about you guys, and I'm going to put link in the description below of this network that you're talking about. I'm going to go check it out because it's fascinating. And lastly, one of the biggest challenges for indie authors and people who are just trying to get a toehold in publishing is to find and connect with an audience. And you guys are rocking it in terms of there's the audience, there's the community, and if you're good at it and enthusiastic about it, dive in swimming, right?
Yeah. Um, I like talking with the with my readers. I got a Patreon. I've got a few people on there that'll comment when I publish chapters. And it's always fascinating how they come up and they pick through things. They'll be like, oh, this. And it's like, okay, yeah, I have that in there. And oh, but what about this aspect of this that was on this page back on this chapter? And it's like, okay, I hadn't thought about that, but okay. Yeah, let me rewrite that to make it more consistent. But that's what you want is somebody that's reading and enjoying your work to the extent that, yeah, they're going to come back and reread it. That's the fun part is knowing that it's not just a quick obsession or a quick fix, that they're reading your work and rereading it. That's really what we're wanting to get is the kind of that kind of readership. And a lot of the authors are getting that. I know of readers and listeners for Dungeon Crawler Carl that have listened completely to the system to the audiobooks again because Matt Denneman's next book is coming out on the 12th, which I am definitely not publishing anything on May the 12th because nothing else is going to be listened to or seen or heard until that book is finished. And probably by me too.
And as far as these beta readers go, like they check it out, they provide feedback. Have you taken advice from your readers to tweak your own content and adjust the story or change stuff up?
Oh, yeah. You have to. Most of the writers have a little bit of OCD to them. So once they know that there's a little bit of an issue, they want to get it taken care of because we want to present to our readers the best work that we can.
That's great. This does not happen this way. So, for example, I talk to a lot of writers in different genres, and for science fiction and fantasy, it's often a struggle for writers to find beta readers. They got to put it out on their newsletter, like, hey, I'm looking for beta readers. And it's not really an integrated part of the process as far as the marketing aspect goes. It's usually like an inner circle of writers will share their stuff and they'll tweak it and then they'll polish it off and then they'll send it out there. But it sounds like in LitRPG, it's so engaging and dynamic that the readers are taking a pretty active role in the content and are really pumping up the distribution. That's very, very interesting.
It is. And they're doing that through both. Well, sometimes they'll be looking for readers on Reddit. Other authors will post it on Royal Road. Not everybody follows the exact same procedure, but I generally post my things on Royal Road. Um, and then most will look for beta readers either on Facebook or Reddit. And if you can get 3 or 4 good people to read through your work and tell you what's working, what's not working, it's an absolute joy. Um, I know that one of the things that I found was uh, another author in a group I'm in called Writers Dojo. He posted the ABCD of doing a review or doing a beta read. So, what's working for it, what's not working, you know, that's been a real good help for me.
It's a writer's dream come true, this subgenre of science fiction and fantasy that frankly a lot of people don't know about, and I hope more people do. It's
I do
yeah.
too. Well, the more writers we get, the more readers we get, the stronger the community. And that's really what LitRPG has been about for the past few years is the community and the readers for us. Most of the writers I know are available on Facebook. I mean, sure, you might have to look them up a little bit, but they're there. And most of them are very easy to talk with. Um, most of them are very fun people, very open about what they're doing. Uh, and of course, you learn through them. And we've got a large community. Of course, people at Dragon Con. There was were the people at Jordan Con over the 2 weekends ago, and then we have the LitRPG Con that is, I believe, going to be in Denver again this year, and this is the second year that it's been held.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about cons because that's where you can actually meet authors and sell books directly. And the other genres like military science fiction, and you got fantasy, they're out there. And this would
Yeah.
be perfect for you guys too,
Well,
plugging
most
in.
authors do go to the conventions.
But I didn't notice a lit RPG kind of thing going on. I was at the LA Comic Con in Pasadena. I was just at the LA Festival of Books. And you guys, I don't think have staked the claim yet, in a very visible way. And it would be, I think, welcome to do that.
It's happening. You know, it's slow. We 3 years ago we had a big convention. It was just after Dragon Con, the Sunday after, at the Atlanta Aquarium, and most of the authors were there. They were giving out signed books and uh, entire sets of books, and you could meet a lot of the different authors through there.
That sounds ideal and an extension of all the vibrant stuff you have going online, too, in terms of the network and in terms of the participation. I want to ask you a little bit, though, about the format again. You were alluding to books in the 80s and the 90s, and I remember the finish the book kind of text. So, for example, you'd be reading and it would say, the character is about to jump out of the window. If you want the character to jump out the window, turn to page 82. And if you want the character to not jump out the window, keep going.
Right.
So that's interactive kind of writing. And then electronically in the 80s, when the first PCs came out, before there were graphic cards and you didn't have these sophisticated graphic games, there was interactive fiction. I don't know if you're familiar with interactive fiction, Zork, Infocom, and you would type into, there'd be a little blinky on the screen, and it would say, like, you're standing in front of a boarded White House. There's a mailbox here, and then you type into the prompt just letters, no graphics. Open the mailbox, and then it would respond. You open the mailbox, and it reveals a leaflet. And then they had fantasy, they had science fiction, they had horror, they had detective stories, and you were the character going through the story. You were the protagonist. So your stuff reminds me a little bit like that. It's almost like a transcript of a game that you're reading, just like when you're on Twitch watching somebody play a video game.
That's
Lit
actually,
RPG is got a little bit of the style of eavesdropping on a game that's happening. It's not directly interactive because it's obviously words on a page or word on a screen, but it's got that interactive kind of flavor to it.
yeah, it's that's actually a very good analogy. Think of it exactly like those games, but you're actually seeing more of the system behind it. So it might be in the instance of you open the mailbox and it rolls dice in the background of what you find inside the mailbox or what's behind that door or different things like that. But yes, I remember the 1980s games very well. Everything was in ASCII. Let's see, Temple of Apsai was one of the games that we had when I was a kid, and it was like a roguelike today. Actually, it basically was a roguelike where it would populate a dungeon, and you would move your character through the dungeon. Um, so, yeah, growing up with video games as I did, it kind of was a pivotal thing for us.
Writing is in a weird place right now. So social media is taking over the world. Now we got AI, and everyone's into multimedia, video especially, and even interactive video. again with the AI. And in ways, LitRPG is kind of a throwback. It's a little bit like vinyl records, right? So you're actually reading words on a page. Already, that's kind of weird for the younger generation. They don't read that much. And then you're adding this element, this overlay of this interaction between the system, the characters, the system and the characters, and the reader. But it's on a page, it's static. So to me, you guys are kind of like a throwback and at the same time more advanced because you're integrating all these things in a very creative way. Does
I'd
that
say
make sense
so.
as an outsider? It's kind of weird. It seems fun. It's got a lot of opportunity to blow up in your head, but it's eccentric in this kind of way.
It is. But again, it's one of those things that after a while it seems very natural. I've talked to readers that they get so used to it that they're okay. I was reading such and such a book and it didn't have anything in there about a system or anything, and it was making me nervous because and it just suddenly becomes something that is there.
Created its own style, its own subgenre. And then people who are into it are into it. So that when they read something that isn't system based, doesn't have the prompts and the stats, then they're like, hey, where's the scaffolding? Where's this other narrator? You start to miss it because you're used to that structure and style. You're a
Yeah.
fan. If you listen to a lot of Metallica, then you know even if it's Megadeth, you might not dig it. So you get into the tribe, you get into what's going on. And for LitRPG, it's its own distinct thing. And that I think is part of its strength because that's how you build community. You got to be different. You got to wave the flag. You got to be boastful almost of how you're different from the rest, and then kind of cut your own way.
Yeah. Well, it is partly that, but it's also very unique, I think, in the fact that it's just kind of blown up as it has. Again, Matt Dinneman is a lot of the cause of that, but I actually think that it would have without him to some extent. It just would have taken a little bit longer.
Every genre needs its superhero, right? To kind of pave the way, and then it electrifies the community, and then people jump on board, both writers and readers. From your estimation, what works and what doesn't? So I can see it getting a little out of hand with the systems and the rankings and the world building. One of the challenges, especially in science fiction and fantasy, is people spend so much time with the window dressing, they don't really focus on the characters as much as they should. And then it's just
That's
props and gimmicks. And on the plus side, just like you mentioned, you're accentuating all of these character traits in a way that normally wouldn't happen in regular prose. So I'm assuming it's striking a balance and picking up best practices as a writer and even as a reader that make it a compelling story and not just an exercise in copying a video game.
there is actually most of the writers and most of the readers break lit RPG down into two different ways: crunchy and non crunchy. Crunchy is when you're very heavy with the system, very heavy with the prompts, very heavy with the character sheets, and non crunchy, you have it every once in a while, and while it is still part of the story and helps to define the story, it doesn't become the story. It isn't as heavily intensive in the story. Sean Oswald in his Welcome to the Multiverse started something recently where he'll just put the chapter about the character sheet and say, okay, this is a chapter about the character sheet. If you don't want to listen to this, you can go on and hit the fast forward button to the next chapter. which is fantastic for a lot of readers who don't want to listen to that part. They just want the story. Or, so there's that. Um, that's also a breakdown which we call game lit, which is, yes, it's still game lit with a system. It's just not that lit RPG aspect of having the RPG character sheets and so heavily into the system. So there's, a lot of different aspects. So if you're ever on a forum and somebody, oh, I'm looking for something that's really crunchy, they mean they want heavy numbers because that's what they're into. Every writer is going to be different. I try and strike a balance. The balance that I'm going for is to tell more story with less. I sent you a copy of something that I was working on that I actually just finished. I've been working on that for about 3 years, called Digital Doctrine. Not lit RPG, but it kind of tangentially is related to the Apprentice of Arabella series. It happens 60 years ahead before that. So it has an AI in it, but it's kind of defining what AI is in the future and how the AIs work or their base parameters. Uh, Absolutely no stats, nothing about the character's strengths or weaknesses. It's just pure storytelling from that aspect. Where Apprentice of Arabella, he's in a game, and so his character in the game has stats and abilities and everything there.
I like your prose. It's slick and you get to it. There's nothing extraneous. It reads fast and has depth to it. So I liked it what you showed me and what I read. So I can tell that you're not a spring chicken. You've got your hours honing your craft, which is
Oh, I
which is
still
which
work
is
on
good.
it. I've got exercises I do usually once, twice a week to try and improve my writing.
Well, you got a good baseline already. I thought, I do a lot of reading. I read all the stuff from all my guests, and just your prose in its essence is smooth and easy to digest and just descriptive enough to be compelling. So
Well, thank
kudos,
you.
kudos, kudos to your prose. In terms of readers, how do you think it distributes? Crunchy, non crunchy, game lit? Do people like the crunch more than the emo character driven stuff?
Honestly,
What's
I
the
think that
audience
it's
like?
probably split 50-50.
Yin and yang, like two sides of the brain. And it's interesting that the genre can appeal to both by dialing up one, dialing down the other, and depending on how you play it. And kudos to you also for changing up your style. Not many writers do that. A lot of writers will get into one style that works, and then every book is just pretty much template from that one.
Well, for me, it starts with what if. And sometimes that what if goes completely off the rails, sometimes it doesn't. Um, Sometimes goes completely wrong. I had one that I did last year that I just it wasn't selling well. I took it off, but it was a story where the writer is writing a journal. So you're reading the journal entries. And he's a an intern that gets a job at the government, and he's like, I wish I'd paid more attention. I shouldn't be here. They told me I was going to be working with a scientist. They didn't tell me that they were going to be making anthropomorphic dogs for the military. And so it goes from that aspect, and it was supposed to be very comedic, but like I said, it did not sell very well.
You don't know until you know. And what I also find interesting is that you write to get read. There's some writers who just write it and throw it out there, and they won't think twice about really an audience. And other writers are like, well, if I'm writing and nobody reads it, what's the damn point? And maybe they're telling me something. So if it's not working, it's not working, especially if you've got a targeted audience that's hungry for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, for this, it is a target audience, but there's no bad story. It's just an author that hasn't found their readership. And they may not have found exactly the right style for them. Um, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. There's been more than a few sleepless nights, and my wife telling me, hey, look, I need help with the kids, which, can be fair sometimes, but it's just something that you fall into, and you have to try not to get stuck in the story. And that's one of the things that many authors do is they get stuck in their story, not thinking exactly how the story might have impact on some of the readers. One of the things that has happened with other writers is they will have very adult situations, and then they will throw it out there for the readers and not realize, hey, maybe somebody 18 doesn't need to be reading that. Or maybe we need to back off on the spicy language. Um, as you read some of my work, you might find that there's not a lot of spicy language because I'm thinking, what if my kids listen to it?
What is the age target for your stuff and for lit RPG in general? I'm sure there's gradations of this, and I'm sure there's writers who are maybe spicier on purpose and they're known for that. But what's the general age range for your readership?
The general age range, I think, is going to be 18 to about 36. Um, the older kids or older teenagers, realistically, probably the 20 year old, 25, 26, right in that general range, because that's the way that a lot of the protagonists are written as younger people. Um, let's see. Randomly Ghost Town, I believe the main character in that is 18, 19. The same with He Who Fights with Monsters. He's probably about 22, 23 when the story starts. So most of the stories are written towards that age range with the characters being that. Eighth Earth, 1953. John, he is 28, 29 years old in the story, but he's also lived a lot. When you get into it, he's just gotten out of serving in the military for the past 11 years. He joined at the age of 17 in World War II. So that's a vast difference as far as his perspective to somebody of his age range. Um, I'm trying to think of other stories that the main characters are a little bit older. Um,
How about gender? So I'm tacitly assuming mostly male readers, but I could be totally wrong. Is it 50-50 male female?
Actually, the reader dynamics for LitRPG, I would say that it's probably about 60 to 65% male readers, 35% female readers, and you can see that also broken up as far as the main characters. Um, some of the bigger ones with female characters, Judicator Jane, Aspirant Healer, um, Beneath the Dragon Eye Moon has a female character, of course. So there are some very strong female characters in here. And that is one of the aspects that you will see is that there are strong female characters, but they don't generally take the route of, say, a lot of romance stories where the female characters have to emasculate the male characters to be successful. The women are successful on their own through their own efforts and their own abilities while being in conjunction with male characters who are also there and also strong characters in their own right. Um,
So that'll appeal to both, right? So you got strong female characters and they don't get steamrolled or they're not just a prop
exactly.
for the story. So both genders like it.
Yeah. Um, and again, we also have a lot of female writers in the genre. Dawn Chapman, she's a long-standing writer in the genre. Um, I believe Silky Moon, she's the writer. I think it's a she. You would think so by the name, but sometimes you can't tell. But there's also a lot of female writers in the genre, and we're actually getting a lot more. Um, some people are like, "Oh, I
Women
wouldn't
are
read this."
playing more video games too. Women are
That's
playing
exactly
video
right.
games. So that convergence makes sense. The gender dichotomy in video games is starting to ebb and flow too.
That's true, and it's also very telling that there's always been females in gaming, but it's also been that sometimes men haven't been as patient with them, and so they'll do their own thing, which that's great. But some of the writers are fantastic. Azrath Healer, very good. Beneath the Dragon's Eye Moon. I think I've actually read the entire series except for the last two books. Um, yeah,
What about distribution by modality? So ebook, Kindle versus paperback, hard copy. How does it shake out? Audiobook?
that's
How
the
do people
thing.
like to absorb the content?
I think that the content absorption rate is actually very interesting. Mostly it's ebook or audiobook. The breakdown, I think, would actually be about 65% ebook to 35% audiobook. And while you do have hardback copies or bound copies available, they're not even going to make 1 or 2% of your general sales, which completely different model. Um, the ebooks, a lot of the reason I think that they're higher is because so many of the independent authors can't really afford to do audiobooks on them either yet or they eventually plan on it if at all available. The reason being is the production costs are a little bit higher and they have to be able to justify doing that production, whether it's through ACX or on their own, finding a narrator to pay for them to be able to do it. Um, Aether Earth, it's gotten an audiobook. Um, it's actually pretty good. We've got the next audiobook coming out later on this month. Again, I'm hoping it doesn't come out across against Dungeon Crawler Carl because don't want to get pasted on that. Uh,
And in terms of the press, you got a press stamp on your book, your publisher. What's that relationship like? Would you consider yourself hooked up with the publisher going indie? What's your status for what you're putting out?
Not only I am an indie author, I only have the one series with a publisher. I would dearly love to get more because that is where one of the key aspects is you get the help, you get the knowledge. Um, Royal Guard Publishing has, I think, about 1,200 published books out now as far as their catalog, which that's absolutely huge. Most of their
Are they
work,
lit RPG specific? They're lit RPG publisher, or they do other stuff?
they do a bunch of other stuff, but it's lit RPG adjacent. Some of it is lit RPG, some of it is Dungeon Core, some of it is Harem, which a lot of that in the lit RPG, more male centric, of course, but they do a phenomenal job. They mostly do through the audiobooks. So that's one of the key aspects of why I went with them. But they also hooked me up with a great editor, and she's actually edited both of my past two books with them. Um, Again, very phenomenal job, very good books. I listened to a bunch of the different things to make sure that they were the people that I wanted to go through. And that's Marcus Schloss with Royal Guard Publishing. There's a bunch of others that have just taken off. As far as the audiobook companies, I would say that most of the publishers in the lit RPG area would be considered low tier as far as the income they're producing. I don't really pay much attention to that, as probably I should, but they are doing very well for what they do because they know their genre, they know their readers, they know the right way to market their books where more traditional companies might not know. Um, if you ever get a chance, an example of this is if you ever get a chance, take a look at the first cover for Dungeon Crawler Carl, book one, and see what he did for his ebook. And apparently, he's maintained rights for his ebooks to publish those, while I believe it's Penguin is his publisher for the hardback. They've got that right, and they came back with a completely different cover. And you look at the two covers, and you're going, where did this come from? This doesn't even look like the book. This doesn't look like, you know. So they're getting a lot of the hype from the ebooks and from the audiobooks. And so that's helping them. I just don't think that the covers are really what's helping them sell so much. I mean, because you look at the cover, it's completely different. It looks like a video game, and it's very lighthearted. You know, you've got a guy running around in heart covered boxer shorts, wearing a leather jacket, being chased by a bunch of goblins. You know, so
Sounds like the publisher doesn't really understand the reader.
I don't know if they do, or, and this might be the other aspect, they're hoping to build a new type of readership by extending that bridge out and not showing it so much the comedic cover and being a little bit more serious.
And what's the future of lit RPG from what you can tell? AI is now putting a crunch on writers in general. To your point, AI books are being pumped out there by the thousands, millions, and writers are feeling pressure from every angle, not only creating their books, but getting them out there. It's unbelievably crowded. How does the
Well,
next 2 to 5 years look for the genre and for what you're doing?
honestly, I don't know. Um, I'm hoping that it's really good, really solid. But my thought is that we need to start looking at AI as a tool to be used, specifically for research. When I was writing book two of Aether Earth, I needed to know what the speed limit was in 1953 through Louisiana. Hint, there wasn't one. But I'm looking at it from what, 60 years on and going, okay, so where would I find this information? And so I could use AI and say, hey, look, I want you to take a look on this stretch of road. Tell me what the stated rules for the road was at the time. And it comes back with generally, it was not, roads were not capped as far as the speed limits. Okay, that seems counterintuitive, but the state highway laws and national highway laws didn't come into place until the 1960s. And that's what it was able to tell me. Do you know how long it would have taken me to find that on my own trying to Google it?
James Elroy, who wrote LA Confidential, he's awesome, but he's got a bunch of people just doing research for him, or at least he did, with little index cards, and he spends like a year outlining the book and doing his R&D. But I use the super Google, AI to find stuff. It's not cheating; it's just getting to the point faster rather than reading through a dozen different websites about Texas highways, right? Till you find it.
Right. Work smarter, not harder. Because I didn't have to spend hours researching that, that's hours that I could actually spend writing the book.
Right. I agree totally. There's a silver lining to this AI stuff, which is you could write better and faster without really breaking your own rules of what constitutes being a good writer, which is pedal to the metal, put your passion into it, put your lived experience into it. And to your great point, connect with your readers. Know what they like, listen to them, and embrace the genre which you adore, which it sounds like you're doing in droves.
Well, I try to, and it's absolutely fun. One of the other things that I do a lot of times is try and help other new writers um, on Facebook or on Reddit. You know, oh, I need to. How do I market myself? How do I do this? Well, this is what I've done in the past. This is what I've done that didn't work. This is what I've done that did work. So that's the other thing too that I'm seeing with LitRPG. A lot of times, other writing groups they want to keep their secrets to themselves. They want somebody to help them, but they don't want to help anybody else. Here, the writers are helping the new writers become better writers because I believe that the actual theory is that a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's kind of the way that I'm trying to look at it and help other people. Because if they develop more readers in the genre, they might find my work.
I have to say that this podcast, your episode, I think 47 or 48 of the Science Fiction Factory, I got other podcast shows too, but just within science fiction and fantasy, this to me has been the most interesting in terms of a newer genre that I wasn't that familiar with. And when you open up the hood and I can look in there with you, it exemplifies all the best practices that a lot of other writers have either been talking about or hoping to achieve. Built-in community, collaboration, writing to get read, help with marketing and distribution, a cool format that's refreshing and very creative and innovative, and really a passionate community of both writers and readers who are all vested. And I got to check out that, what is it, the Royal Road network. It's just such a great opportunity for creatives and readers to interact with each other in ways they never do in the other
It
forums.
is. Right now, I think there's about 60,000 different books on Royal Road that's available. Some of them completed, some of them not completed. But it's been absolutely phenomenal seeing that amount of growth. And again, some of the biggest lit RPG writers got started there and discovered there.
Love it. That's great. You know, Andy Weir is the biggest sci-fi fantasy writer now. He's got the Hail Mary movie,
Hmm.
and he did it the old school hard way. He had a blog, and then he created a mailing list pretty much from scratch, and he had to build that mofo up every email by email. And he ended up, I think he mentioned, with like maybe as many as 20, 30,000 people, but it took him 10 years. And this was when the internet was just starting to get really cranked, 20 odd years ago. And you have a unique opportunity that all of your lit RPG minions are taking advantage of. Just dive in swimming. All the readers are there. They're hungry for this kind of content. And if you got even a modicum of talent and enthusiasm, you could just start participating immediately and get all the benefits instead of spending hours, days, weeks online just trying to find community and connect with people. I wish more people would do this kind of setup. It's brilliant.
Well, it's growing every week. We see new writers coming in, new books coming on. There's books that, we don't even sometimes even know are going to come out. Um, when I got started, you might see 3 or 4 new books a month. Now it's sometimes 3 and 4 new books a day.
This is just getting going. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Kent, Lit RPG Maestro, turning us on to the genre if you haven't been turned on before. If you're familiar with it, then we got to look under the hood and dive in. And you gave us some great best practices and insights. So whether you're a writer, you're a reader, I found this really interesting too, which is just I got to check this stuff out and maybe pick up a few of these good habits for my own writing. So thank you for joining us, Matthew. I'm going to have all your links and
All right.
descriptors below. Check out your books, go to Royal Road. And if you're into it and even just curious about it, dive in.
All right. Thank you much. I appreciate it. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Thank
All
you.
right.
Like, comment, share, subscribe.